inspiring presentation. Thank you for enlightening us on some of those nuances on water. I think it's very difficult to keep a presentation within 7 minutes, and I think all my foremost speakers in the panel have done a great job. And that's what we call as a smart talk for a smart city. Quickly going through what I would really like to cover today is the question of sustainable city. And what is a sustainable city? Obviously, one of the key issues is what was spoken by my preceding speaker, which is water. So a city with self-reliant and self-renewing economic activity with smallest ecological footprint and ensuring quality of life of all the stakeholders, and that's what a sustainable city is. In many cases, I'm also the convener for the Smart City Standards for Bureau of Indian Standards, and one of the points that came out was that can we ensure that a city has the smallest amount of energy footprint? Now one can obviously do that, one can stop doing everything, one can shut down this hotel and you'll have zero energy consumption, so you'll be absolutely sustainable. But that's not what we're looking at. What we're looking at is the smallest energy consumption for every rupee of economic activity that's happening. If you can do this conference with far lesser amount of energy, then that's smarter. But it's not smart not to meet up and not to do any economic activities, and that needs to be kept in mind. There are a whole bunch of challenges that are there when we're looking at sustainable cities. The need to grow, escape from poverty, aging infrastructure and uncertain future growth, fundamental doubts about market-led approaches that the current global financial crisis have engendered. Is the current economic structure really allowing a happy society to happen? How many of you have heard of the term Gini coefficient? Have you heard of the term Gini coefficient from an economic perspective? Basically, it's an economic term which measures the least amount of disparity in income levels. If you've got less disparity, you've got a more happier economy and a happier city. And obviously, the current market-led approaches is not letting us have a better Gini coefficient. We are going from bad to worse every year. Dependence on fossil fuel-powered vehicles, increasing democratization of decision-making as well as increasing awareness of social and economic rights among ordinary people, leading to things like what we had in the Middle East of people power coming up. We had the same thing happening in India with many of the people movements coming in. And there are also larger mega trends with development of sustainable energy. You'll be surprised to know that as of last month, in the last bids that came out in solar energy, the cost of solar has become less than the cost of grid energy. The solar energy has now become cheaper than coal-fired energy, than fossil fuel energy. And it's going to be a turning point. This is a watershed moment as of this month. This little metric that solar is cheaper than your conventional fuels is a turning point on how energy will be produced and consumed in the cities. Access to safe drinking water and sanitation, we've talked about it, green buildings, and revision to policies, laws, and regulations. Now, having said all of that, and you would have heard it umpteen number of times, whenever we talk about smart cities, you would have heard of all of these things. And therefore, we've got the example of Stockholm, we have the example of Toronto, we've got the example of many cities in the world which are quote-unquote smart. These are some pictures I took from a city in the far western part of Nepal, which is the least developed part of Nepal. And Nepal itself is a least developed country. So this is the least developed part of a least developed country. So what do these pictures communicate? The first picture is obviously a solar panel, which costs about 25,000 Nepali rupiah, subsidized by the government, which is fine. But what would you do anywhere else? You would take the solar panel energy, you will pump it into a battery, then you will put electronics to pump it up to 220 volts and connect it to your power supply. What they've instead done, and you will see the next two pictures, is they have not used any electronics to pump it up to 220 volts. They've connected the 5-volt battery straight to the board in the television. So the television works directly from the battery. All the connections within the house is 5-volt. They're not putting a 220-volt connection at all. So there's no wastage of energy in converting the energy from 5 volts to 220 volts. And that's smart. Look at the next picture. What it shows is a biogas plant. Now it's mandatory in this city for every toilet to be connected to a biogas plant. So there is no multi-billion-dollar sewage system. There is no multi-billion-dollar grid. It's absolute pristine blue and ecosystem, absolutely clean environment. They've not spent billions of dollars for the grid, for electricity. They've not spent billions of dollars for the sewage system. All of it is getting treated at C2. Now, what can be smarter than this? Isn't this ecologically self-sustainable? If they need to scale up, they can put another panel and they don't need to be dependent on even their own hydel energy, which is coming from Nepal. And therefore, there are building blocks to put together what is a sustainable city. Promote sustainable urban development. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into the details of what a sustainable urban development would mean, but just keeping the bigger issue and bigger point of sustainable urban development in mind. Facilitate partnership among various actors. As my preceding speakers were saying, it's not just the government's duty and responsibility. It's for the people, for the civil society, for NGOs, for everybody to come together and to implement what we're talking about. If you keep your geyser on, what can the government do? If you don't switch off your lights, what will the government do? It's for us to support each other, to make sure that the city actually truly becomes a sustainable city and we don't waste water, energy, and so on. Involve public to bring in behavioral change and develop an integrated roadmap for urban development by identifying the key areas. And therefore, can we rate the cities in terms of bronze, silver, or gold, or as we are attempting to do in Bureau of Indian Standards, can we give them a 5-star rating like what we have in Bureau of Energy Efficiency? You have got the energy consumption ratings. You've got the 1-star air conditioners, you've got the 2-star air conditioners. Can we rate the cities accordingly based on how much energy they consume, based on how much water they consume, how much they recycle? And as of today, it's no more a science fiction that cities can recycle their entire water and live without importing water from outside. And it's possible, it's happened in smaller sectors. And therefore, the concept of cradle to cradle. So if we are disposing of our electronic goods, can we extract the gold, the silver, the various rare earth metals from the mobile phone and send them back for manufacturing? Can we recycle the entire water which is being used in the city and the entire sewage system and recycle it and send it back to the city? So every single thing that the city is throwing off, can it be recycled back and used? If you are throwing off garbage, can we have waste to energy creation? And obviously there are policy changes to be required. Let me just take a small example of the nuances involved. If you take the black sewage, it can obviously be converted into manure and fertilizer. And therefore that enables a revenue stream to come in, and therefore that enables PPP to come in, and therefore that enables somebody to come in and invest in the sewage system, and the government need not do it. But what happens at the end of the day is that fertilizer is competing against chemical fertilizer, which is highly subsidized by the government. And therefore, the naturally created fertilizer coming through the sewage system can never compete with the chemical fertilizer. So obviously, there are a whole bunch of policies and regulations and policy changes that are needed to enable what we're talking about. But all of it is possible. None of it is the realm of impossibility. As we talked about waste to energy, again, if you look at the conventional way of costing, waste to energy will turn out to be about 2 to 3 rupees more expensive than grid electricity. Again, that's happening because we are not considering the fact that if we don't do waste to energy conversion, there is huge amount of cost that is going into just processing that waste. You would have seen these mountains of dumps being put in and the crows and the birds flying around. What is the cost of that? Has anybody put the cost of that? And unless we put the cost of that, we can't really compare the cost of waste to energy electricity and the waste being managed independently. In the interest of time, I'll just move forward and come to my last slide. I was right in time. Well, the last slide is, we've talked about all other kinds of sustainability. What about economic sustainability? I just took a picture from Wikipedia on what a ghost town is. And last year we had, the city of Detroit came pretty close to becoming a ghost town. And we all know why. because the core industry on which the city of Detroit was based on, which is automobiles, was going away. The General Motors and the big car companies of US was getting muscled out from the global automobile industry. And therefore, entire Detroit was becoming a ghost city. Now imagine, for example, the city of Kanpur, which is taken as an example, with the tanneries being there, and tomorrow we come out with synthetic leather, which replaces all kinds of leather, or we come out with some other replacement of leather. What happens to the core industry of Kanpur, and therefore what happens to the city of Kanpur? It will become a ghost city. And we see that happening in our neighboring country of China again and again. Again, that's something I've picked up from Google, where are cities after cities which are either ghost cities, which is they became populated and then depopulated, or they never got populated to begin with. And therefore, economic sustainability becomes a very critical component of the entire conversation on sustainability.